So it's actually great to be in Palo Alto for once. I think I spent like the majority of 2017 on airplanes. So the fact that there's actually a cryptocurrency conference like at biking distance from home is really nice. So I'm going to be talking about the decentralization and the future of capital markets. And as mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Swarm. So, right, where do we start? Problem statement. So basically, private capital assets such as private equity and alternatives are really hard to buy and sell. And they have really high transaction costs, and it's like basically not a transparent asset class, and it's unavailable to 99% of investors out there. So, that's basically the reality that we're dealing with. And so I've kind of attacked this space from a number of different angles over the years. One of my first companies was a company called VentureLink, where we did a syndication platform for family offices to bring capital from outside Silicon Valley to invest in Silicon Valley companies. So it's a little bit like an angel list, but with a couple of more zeros behind each of the investment tickets. And then subsequently, I was part of founding Banker Bay, which is a global deal origination platform. Today, it is sourcing $30 billion of private equity deals on a monthly basis from 140 different countries. It's the largest one in the world in its category. So that was kind of my second venture in this space. And now, I'm with Swarm. So we believe that all private capital markets should be democratized and available to everyone. And this should be done with full transparency and liquidity. So that's our belief statement. And then, so if we look at what does that require? Well, it pretty much requires a financial revolution. So, Swarm's open platform is really breaking up the value chain for financial services. And so to make an analogy to, what the ERC-20 and smart contract development meant to the blockchain when Ethereum brought that on, we're doing the same thing, but this time it's not for, ERC-20 tokens. This time it's for security tokens. So, a little bit about the initial market we're going after. So private equity, obviously huge $4.7 trillion market. There's a number of different categories or sub-asset classes within that market. I think the most well-known in this community is probably venture capital. But then there's also, private debt, there's real estate, there's infrastructure financing, as well as, financing of natural resource projects. So it's basically a huge category. Is not very well known to the general public, and there are good reasons for that. So how does this market work? Well, so it's massive, but it's an illiquid market, and it's really hard to get in. So if you want to invest in private equity, you pretty much need to have $1 to $5 million, and you need to put it away for 5 to 10 years. So unless you fit that description, you're not going to be an investor in this space. Once you have invested in private equity, then your capital is locked in for many, many years. So, you're basically stuck with your investments. And this is it's been pretty obvious for the people that have been in the venture space for many years that the lack of, let's say, transparency and liquidity is really painful if you've been in venture for, let's say, 15, 20 years. You kind of have a full cycle view on it. It's also very opaque in the sense that you have no idea what's going on. You're getting quarterly reports as a fund investor, which tells you that your investment is worth X, but it's a paper value, and until that investment has been sold to someone and you actually know, you don't know what the market value is until that happens. So it's very difficult to know where your investment is at. And then by and large, this market is controlled by institutions and middlemen. So we're trying to change that. So solution is Swarm, open market infrastructure for financial services. We built this based on 3 core principles. One, no middlemen. So, if you've been in the financial services market, you know that there's like a ton of middlemen all over the place, just kind of cutting and slicing and dicing this market. There's fees everywhere. So at the outset, we wanted to create an architecture by which you could basically invest in these high-value asset classes without any middleman whatsoever. So it's a very core fundamental principle that we're building this on. Second principle, interoperable. So anything that's going to get built in the financial markets that's going to have any kind of scale needs to be interoperable with other kind of constituents in that market. So if you try to build a global monolith, you'll get killed because the stakes are just too high. So interoperability is a key element. And coming back to the Ethereum analogy, we created something called the SRC20 token, which is the security token standard. Thirdly, it needs to be decentralized, kind of coming back to the same argument about like if you're going to do this on a global basis, you have to create like a very robust community and structure around how that's going to grow across basically the globe. So, you know, if you want to scale this to global level, then it has to be decentralized and it has to be community driven. Because nobody's going to trust a global financial platform that's driven by, you know, 3 guys in Palo Alto, even if it has a team of 35 people currently. Okay, this is a bit of a heavy slide, but you know, bear with me. So on the left-hand side, you have your standard kind of ERC20 token, and you know, so we, like many other projects, have a utility token called the Swarm token. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but it basically feeds functions like liquid democracy, and it also works like as a gas function on the platform. So more importantly, the novelty in what we're doing is we're basically creating this universe of SRC20 tokens. So for any particular fund or asset that wants to have access to the crypto investor community or just wants to have liquidity for their existing investors or positions, then they can create through Swarm an SPV, which is a, you know, kind of a financial technical term, special purpose vehicle that we help tokenize. So we basically create a security token which is representing the value of that underlying asset or fund. So in this particular instance, the security token name is SEC, and the investor guy that's standing there with his money can invest directly into the SEC token or buy the SEC token without any middlemen. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, a mission accomplished in that sense. And then the other aspect is that in order to enter the circle of SRC20 tokens, you have to be qualified as a investor. Depending on your jurisdiction, you have to, you know, meet certain criteria. If we're in the US, you need to be at least accredited. If you're in other jurisdictions, you know, there are other requirements for you to enter this ecosystem. So that's kind of, you know, one of the key aspects of providing a compliant platform for this. The other key aspect is that you have to implement transfer restrictions so that when you're going to sell your security tokens, you can only sell them to people that are allowed to buy them. So you have to keep track of like who's allowed to buy my asset, and then, you know, all of that stuff has to be built into the infrastructure. So that's what we built in Swarm. And then outside of Swarm, in order to make this successful, we also like have initiated partnerships with other exchanges, or I should say exchanges that are supporting security tokens. So, you know, in order for this to be successful, we want to have at least a couple of exchanges in Europe, Asia, around the globe that support, you know, security tokens so that we can have, you know, this is a kind of a growing ecosystem with as many participants as possible. Same goes for, you know, SRC20 issuers. So we're not going to do this by ourselves. So when it comes to the Swarm token, it's really an essential element that kind of powers the whole ecosystem. So if you think about how Ethereum works, the network is powered by the Ether tokens, and you basically, as soon as you want to move value from one wallet to another, or if you want to execute a smart contract, you have to pay gas in Ether. Same thing with Swarm. So basically, if you want to operate or create the fund on Swarm, you need to pay the Swarm Foundation in Swarm tokens. And in the same way, if you're an investor and you want to participate in this, you know, fabulous ecosystem, which is regulatory compliant, then you have to pay with Swarm tokens. And once you have done that, then, you know, you're also, as a holder of Swarm tokens, you're also participating in the, you know, in the decision making around the direction of the platform. So you can use your Swarms to vote for the direction of, you know, which funds should be on the platform, etc. So, you know, clearly this is like from the outset, we looked at what we're doing as clearly one part of what we're doing is security tokens, because it was so obvious from the outset that, you know, if you're representing a fraction of an underlying private equity fund, for example, then that's going to be a security token. On the other hand, we also saw that if we construct the Swarm token economics in the right way, we can basically just say that, look, this is the payment method for our Amazon Web Services that we're providing to these fund managers and investors. And, you know, therefore, you need to pay us using that token. So what kind of funds do we have on the platform? So over the last 12 months, we talked to a number of different fund managers as well as investors in kind of the family office, high net worth category, and as well as in the hedge fund industry, as well as obviously listening to kind of the retail, let's say the student from Indonesia or something like that. There's like a full range of investors that we had dialogues with. We came up with a couple of categories that we wanted to kind of shape and set the direction of the platform ourselves initially, just to kind of show how we thought about this. And then, so we ended up with like, private equity and real estate as a subcategory of private equity is really a big market. I already saw that with Banker Bay. It's like, we already had like 25% of the whole platform value was in the real estate space. Now with Swarm, I'm kind of seeing the same thing all over again, where real estate is a big category. We had a lot of people come up to us and kind of wanted to tokenize, anything from like a future project in real estate to existing positions in real estate funds. One of the things we're doing, which is coming up in the next few weeks, is we're looking at bringing a REIT onto the platform to kind of bring crypto investors, give them the possibility to invest into REIT as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about that before the Puerto Rico events, because that's actually an investment fund for property in Puerto Rico. And then we have obviously ICO and tech funds. So on our platform today, we have a pre-IPO technology fund. You can basically buy tokens into Airbnb and Uber ahead of their IPO, whenever that's going to happen. So it's basically, an easy way to access those otherwise very inaccessible asset classes. ICO funds, there's a bunch of them out there. We're trying to figure out which are the good ones that we want to have on the platform, and to kind of work through that curation process to make sure there's quality type of assets on Swarm. Third category, algo traded hedge funds or crypto funds. It's like impossible to avoid that category. So you just have to kind of have one or two or several. Everybody wants to get in. We're trying to figure out who the good ones are. Renewables is another space. But end of the day, we don't want to make these decisions. This has to be a community-driven, process, and the governance of it. So that's kind of the whole point. So we're handing off to the community to make these decisions. Hold the questions, please. I'll happy to talk about it afterwards. So beyond IRR and pure returns, we're facilitating global impact. So, we have things like, funds to offset blockchain energy consumption, affordable housing development in Pakistan, mineral harvesting at the, bottom of the Pacific Ocean. So you can do a lot of cool stuff here to make an impact. And, one of the more kind of cool examples would be that you would like rally up all the drivers from Uber and have them kind of put together a pool of capital to buy a corner position in Uber to, have some influence of the company that they actually were part of creating. Look, this talk is about the future, but I'm happy to say that the future is here. So we launched invest.swarm.fund 2 weeks ago. We had 3,500 users after 5 days from 53 countries. And, so we're pretty much busy on doing all these compliance checks of people everywhere and KYCs and whatever else. And we have 2 live funds today, 25 funds in the pipeline. So it's like a huge kind of out-of-the-gate progress for us. So we're really happy about that. And then the roadmap is like, execute on these investments that we now have on the platform. Next step is obviously focusing on automation. If we are going to have like thousands of users and investors coming onto the platform, how do we automate like the regulatory compliance checks, and how do we automate the onboarding of new funds onto the platform? It's like really key aspects. After that, we're going to open this up to like I mentioned, security token compliant exchanges all over the world, so we can start trading these things over and outside of the Swarm platform itself. And then after that, once we reach some critical mass in AUM on the platform, then we can introduce AI and kind of use clever algorithms to allocate capital across the different assets on the platform. This requires a capable team. It's a very ambitious plan. We have Chris Kitsey is a chairman of the Alphabet fund, is on our advisory board. We have Michael Turpin, obviously needs no introduction in this context. We have Marco A, used to be a fund manager at Sequoia Capital. Is really involved in what we're doing. Chris used to run, head of business marketing at Facebook. He's our CMO right now, and is like, a major contributor to the team. And then last but not least, Philip, our CEO, founder of Proximic, sold it to Comscore. He's doing this together with me and Chris and the rest of the team now here in Palo Alto. And join us. Let's create the future of capital marketplaces.